Hello, everyone, and welcome to Season 12 of Bovine Banter with the Penn State Extension Dairy Team. I'm Rainey Rosemond, and I'm a dairy educator based in Berks County, Pennsylvania. Joining us today are two people. The first is named Jonas Fisher, and he's a farmer in Lancaster County. And the second is John Tyson, an ag engineer with the Penn State Extension Dairy Team. Thanks for being with us today, Jonas and John. Before we get started, I was hoping that both of y'all could take a second to introduce yourself and tell us a little bit about what you do. Jonas, I'll go ahead and start with you.
Yes, hello. Yes, I'm Jonas Fisher. I'm in Lancaster County, Pennsylvania, on a family farm here that I was born and raised on. We have 46 tie stalls. Farm consists of 72 acres. Also rent an additional 40 acres. It's a family farm, no outside employees. My wife and I have 5 boys and 2 girls, and that's our workforce.
So, John, you want to tell us a little bit about yourself?
Yeah, I'm a agricultural engineering extension agent here in Mifflin County, central part of the state. I've been with Penn State now over 25 years, working dairy housing, but part of that is also farm safety.
So thanks for letting us get to know a little bit about you and what both of y'all do. And John just touched on it a little bit about why he's here specializing in ag safety. Our topic today is going to be ag safety, but even more specifically than that, we're going to be talking about manure gas safety. So if both of y'all are ready, Jonas, I think we'll start with you. You know, we've worked together in the past a little bit, and during this time, you told me about an incident that you had when you were pumping your manure pit. And I was just hoping you could tell us a little bit about this situation and sort of walk us through what had happened.
Okay. The manure storage at the dairy barn consists of about 4 to 5 weeks of manure storage, and I have a satellite pit. So every month or 5 weeks or so, I need to pump that into the other pit. And this incident happened in, I think it was 2017. It was a July afternoon or evening, actually, probably about 6:30, 7 o'clock. It was one of those days. It was probably 90 degrees, humid, no air. And me being aware of the situation I had is probably what really saved me. But I do use gypsum bedding, and I'm totally aware that can create more gas hazard in the pit. So, but I guess being farmers as we are, we get busy. We get pushed in schedule. You know, the pit was all but full. Actually, it was full. It needed to be pumped. So I put the pump in. I pumped about 16 inches to 2 foot of manure out of the pit so I could agitate. And once I had done that, I put it into agitate mode, and I was standing right there at the pump, which to the back of me was the barn wall. In front of me was a PTO. To the left was the tractor, and to the right was the manure pit. And I was standing there running the agitator. And while being aware that gases can be an issue there in the pit is definitely what helped me. I think I felt like a tightness. There was also, I could smell it, but that wasn't necessarily what triggered me as much as I felt like there was something not right. And I left the area very quick. And obviously my only way out of there was over the PTO, which was properly shielded. But the best way to explain it, I took it out of there like a rabbit. I mean, I took off. I knew something wasn't right. And I made it probably about 75 feet away from the pit. My lights went out without any warning. I woke up, I was laying flat on my back on the driveway. Don't know how long I was out, but it was way too close. Reading up on that, as far as what I actually experienced, I now know I got extremely lucky, because basically what I was dealing with, one breath will knock you out and the second breath will take your life. What I did wrong that night, I know what I did wrong. I was aware that I had an issue, and I was busy and hadn't should have pumped it a day or so before, so it wasn't running over, but it was full. It had to be done. But the biggest mistake I made was the weather conditions: humid, hot, no wind, and everything that was there was just going to hang there. I mean, basically what my remedy to that is, I positively will not do that unless we have a good breeze blowing. And even then, it's fine. If I have a northwest wind, like it's not hard to get here in Lancaster County, I have no issues at all. But that was my biggest mistake, was the weather conditions. And like I said, me being aware that potentially be an issue is definitely what I think has saved me. But also on top of that is, I have children here on the farm, and I'm always very much a stickler if I'm doing anything there in the pit, stirring manure or hauling. Nobody's to be near for that reason, obviously. So yeah, it turned out to a good experience. It could have been a very bad one. I mean, still don't necessarily it was good, but it was a hard learned lesson, really. And thank God I was able to walk away from it without any lingering effects. I was concerned that I would have lung issues or would have some kind of effects of, from obviously having been gassed. But I can say I had no effects other than, a headache from basically hitting the blacktop. I had an ache in the back of my head from doing that, but otherwise I was fine. So yeah, it was, I just, plead with anybody that, and outside of, obviously I use gypsum and that makes it worse, but there's absolutely no pit that's exempted from gas. And in that situation, hot, humid weather, heavy air and no wind, it doesn't matter what you bed with, you could get caught. So I think that's what I have for now.
Well, thanks for sharing that with us, Jonas. I mean, we're really, given the risk and the situation you were in, we're certainly glad you're healthy and that you were able to join us today, and definitely good to hear that there was no lingering long-term effects on your health. And I was going to ask if you had changed anything within your farm or within your management, and it definitely sounds like you've taken further precautions with, trying to pump earlier and in a more timely manner, and definitely having the weather be right is some things you've implemented to help prevent this in the future. So that's good to hear. Like I said earlier, we're really glad you're healthy and really glad you were able to join us today. I'm going to transition a little to John just to talk to him about some further safety precautions and protocols to put in place. John, you just heard about a very high risk situation involving particularly gypsum bedding and manure pit safety, but also PTO safety. And I would just, before we get started, are you ready to elaborate on some measures farmers can put in place to keep themselves and their loved ones safe?
I can try.
Okay. So before we get started, can you discuss any general risk associated with manure agitation and why manure gas is such a concern?
Well, I think Jonas's example kind of drives home all the reasons we talk about agitation being a risk. There are several manure gases that are a danger, the biggest one being hydrogen sulfide. And that comes with gypsum bedding, but as Jonas alluded to, it's in all manure. And it's by far the most deadly of them. Others are carbon dioxide, carbon monoxide, ammonia, methane. And while they can be dangerous, they are not near as lethal as the hydrogen sulfide. And it usually happens at agitation. That's when the risk is there. When we agitate, we break up that crust. Those gases, because the manure gas is heavier than air, it's actually captured within the manure itself. It's in that structure. So when you agitate it, that kind of releases it to the atmosphere. And then depending on concentration and exposure, what's going to happen. So that's why the gas is worse at agitation than any other time. The PTO safety, Jonas said it is guarded, it is shielded, and that's great. That's one of the first things I remind farmers of, that there are reasons we put shields on PTO shafts, on drive drive chains, to keep us and other folks, children, animals, whatever, out of harm's way. So having those in place is, kind of the best step we can take. Do we recommend going over top of a PTO shaft? No, but when you weigh out what Jonas was up against, that was probably his best bet. He was either going to stay there or leave. So he took the risk and made the escape. Glad to hear it all worked out in the end. So I think that brings up another point of having an escape route or having some way to get away, not only from manure safety gases, but we talk about that a lot in animal safety when handling animals. You never put yourself in a situation with handling animals where you don't have an escape route. So maybe the manure gas is another example of having a way to get away. Set the equipment up so you can operate it from a location that you can easily get out of there without putting yourself in danger.
So we talk about gypsum bedding, and we've mentioned it a couple of times and how it increases risk. Can you kind of give us the lowdown about why this increases risk so much?
Yeah, try not to get off in the weeds as the chemistry too much, but basically hydrogen sulfide is what the gas is, the danger. Gypsum, because of its chemical makeup, it brings more sulfur to the equation. So when we go through the chemical analysis, that's where the sulfur is being supplied for making hydrogen sulfide, the hydrogen coming from the water, the manure, whatever else. So anything that has higher sulfur to it will add more risk to that given manure, gypsum being one of them. Other things that can add to hydrogen sulfide issues are feeds. If you're feeding something that's high in sulfur, like distiller's grains, some other feeds may be high in sulfur, or if your water source on the farm is a high sulfur well. Don't know how much high sulfur wells you have there in Lancaster County where you guys are. Other parts of Pennsylvania do have sulfur wells or have higher concentrations than some parts of the state. That sulfur will basically just go through the cow, doesn't affect her, at least in minor amounts, but it does supply more sulfur ultimately in the equation to hydrogen sulfide. The other risk for hydrogen sulfide is, as Jonas said, he wasn't so much the smell, it was his awareness of it, but hydrogen sulfide has a bad thing of it will deaden the nerve. So you'll smell it for a little brief moment and then you don't smell it anymore. And it can put you in a complacency of, oh, it must have just been a whiff of gas and it went away. Well, actually what happened was your nerves in your nose have been deadened to it and you no longer smell it. It's so potent that it actually become nose blind to it. So you could be standing in a plume of hydrogen sulfide, not even know it because your nose has quit detecting it.
So we talk about sulfur sources and feeds and water being some of them. If you're on a farm with high sulfur output from the cows, whether it's bedding, whether it's feed, whether it's water, are there any additional safety protocols that could be put in place for manure pit agitation just to make sure that this is even less of a risk?
I think Jonas hit on many of them. The biggest one to me is the awareness, as the farmer being aware of it. If you're using a custom hauler, there's a neighbor coming in or a custom hauler coming in, make them aware that there is a higher risk. That's not to say that it's there, but at least they're aware of it. And situations from a safety standpoint of increasing ventilation, doing it on a day when there is a stiff breeze, or artificially adding fan power and fresh air to dilute those down. If it's a more confined space and we have to set up some fans to blow some air through that space and dilute it down. The other is that if one step further would be to use some type of monitoring equipment. There are monitors out there that can detect hydrogen sulfide, and at a certain level will give an audible alarm that basically means, hey, there's a danger here, remove, get you out of there, and then come up with plan B as to what we're going to do to solve that. So being aware of it is probably the biggest safety factor, being conscious of it could be there, being aware of it. Then the solution is to add more air, fresh air, and dilute it down, remove it. It's heavier than air, so it will drift downstream. It will go from, if the manure pit is at a high site, it will drift down towards, if there happens to be a farmstead or calf barn or something below the manure storage, the hydrogen sulfide will kind of follow the contour and roll down. And we've seen that in the past where other animals away from the manure storage have been affected because the gas will kind of just flow as if you were running water down. Where does the water run when it rains? That's where the manure gas is going to flow when it escapes the pit.
So we've talked about, manure gas safety quite a bit, but that wasn't even really the entirety of Jonas's story. He also had to jump over the PTO, and we brought up shielding and guarding the PTO. Is there anything else besides those options for PTO safety when it's running?
Stay out of the way. That's what the shields are there for. But I think the highlight is keeping shields in place. He mentioned there was a shield, and that it did its job as he went over it, whether he touched it or not. The whole point of the shield is to make it to a safe point where you could actually grab a hold of that plastic and it would continue to rotate. So it did its job. So I think the highlight really is just keep shields in place, keep them functioning, and they serve their purpose, other than simply avoid them.
So we talked about, Jonas said he didn't have any long-term health effects, and we're all very, very glad to hear that. And we're talking about safety and prevention, but regardless of those, accidents can still happen. You can be as prepared as possible. So are there any medical precautions after an incident with manure gas that a farmer should take?
I guess the only medical precaution I would say is it wouldn't hurt to visit with a family doctor if you've been exposed, just to get a checkup. Glad to hear that Jonas had no long-term effects, but it is possible that if you were in there long enough or had low enough exposure for a long enough term, you could have long-term damage to the lung tissue and those things. So it never hurts to have a checkup with the doctor once the initial event's over. I'm not being a medical person, I'm not going to say what could happen, but it wouldn't hurt to have a checkup. Hydrogen sulfide doesn't have a history of having some of the same effects as other gases like silo gas, but it wouldn't hurt.
I mean, those were all the questions I had for both of y'all today, and I really appreciate you joining us. Jonas, I'm going to start with you again. If you have any takeaway messages that you'd like to share with our listeners.
Well, we all know a farm is the second most dangerous job next to mining, and it's not a joke. It's not. I grew up on a farm. I have 5 boys, the youngest one being 7 at the time, and we can never be careful enough. It's we have livestock. We have my 7-year-old helps me milk. He's in there dipping cows behind the milkers. He loves doing it. Farming is a very good place to raise a family, but it comes with its dangers. And we can just, it's like you said, Rainey, we can be as careful as possible, and, stuff can still happen. And we don't want to accept that, but it is the fact. A farm it's a great lifestyle. It's a great place to raise a family, but it does definitely come with its risk. And we talked quite a bit on gas and obviously also PTO safety. Back to that, I did have another route out of there, but that was the long way out, and that was actually to circle the back of the pump, which would have soon took me another, several, seconds were critical at that point. But yes, I mean, like I said, there's so many things on a farm that you could just look at. And we as farmers, and back to why my incident happened, we get, how would I say, distracted. We're here every day. We do things every day. And, sometimes we overlook things. And so, I know Penn State's good at doing farm safety things, community events here and there. And, we all need to be occasionally need to be reminded. Penn State has done a great job in having events like that over the years. So just keep up your good work.
Thank you. Glad to hear you enjoy some of them. John, do you have any takeaway messages?
I think I would just give the message, and it really iterates with me what Jonas's story of don't be complacent, and he wasn't. He was aware of what the dangers were, and his awareness of the possibilities is what led him to get out of there quickly. And I think that's probably the best advice I can give on any safety environment. He's right. It's a dangerous thing, but if we think about that and, keep that in your mind while you're doing the task, you're aware of it. Complacency can usually winds up with bad stories. You've done it 100 times, you've done it 1,000 times, and this time it winds up getting you. So I always like to say that probably the best protective equipment, personal protective equipment we have is right between our right and our left ear, and that's our mind. And just being aware of the danger can give you an advantage on it.
So, thank you to both Jonas and John for talking with us today. And as always, thank you to our listeners. We're glad to have you tune in. If you have any further questions regarding this topic, feel free to reach out to me at rfr49@psu.edu. And since this is the first episode of season 12, definitely join us next week to hear from Abby Spackman with Agrobility. Thanks for listening, everyone.